start. So, as I have been saying, oh, by the way, yeah, so if you can't stay for the whole thing, this is going to be on my Instagram story for another 24 hours. And after that, I always post it onto my YouTube channel, and all the previous ones are on my YouTube channel. So, yeah, feel free to look them up if you so desire. They're on different topics like rejection, criticism, motivation, hustle, things like that. Oh, we had an open topic, didn't we, on Christmas, at Christmas. And today's one is mental health. Something else I was going to say. What was it? Can't remember. Anyways, so yeah, the old ones are there if you want to have a look at them. And then there's this one that we're doing now. Dan, oh yeah, that was it. 8 Laws. Hello, Dan, 8 Laws. Yeah, the other thing I was going to say was feel free to comment if you've got thoughts, questions, anything like that. Just throw them on. I might not be able to get to them straight away because if I'm in the flow of a thought that I don't want to lose, I'll finish that thought and then come back to you. I've realised that you know, that's a sort of a little skill I've had to develop doing these because anyways, don't know why I'm telling you that. Not information you need. But yeah, so feel free to comment and all the rest of it. I'm going to start. So, mental health. So I started by, I always start by, just thinking about my own situation and then, taking it out and, hey, Carly, literally just started. And a lot, as other people will say, of what I've just said was just rambling. So you haven't missed a single thing. Where I started with this is that I always start with what do I know about this subject? What do I feel? Do I have any recurring thoughts about this thing that I feel like, yeah, I would really like to share that? And then on top of that, then I start to, do a little bit of research and just see what's out there, see if there's like one thread that I can pull, follow that thread and see if that leads me to anything interesting. And the overarching thing that I realized in looking into this is that I know nothing about this topic. All I know is literally what I've experienced. So I'm going to talk about that and I'm going to talk about the things that we can do to protect ourselves and to help ourselves. Let me just say hello to a couple of people that have just joined. Andy McClure, first name, last name 19, welcome back. Hello. So, Carly, did you mean to send a request to be in the live video? If you did, I'm happy to have you in, but I think people sometimes do that by mistake. So the first place that I wanted to start with this was, the first thing I noticed was that there seemed to be a lot of research looking at a link between creativity and mental disorder, and there were a few stats that popped out to me that I thought I would share with you. One of them was that creatives are 25% more likely to have genes that lead to mental disorder, which was a relief to know that it might potentially be any sort of, mental ill health that I might have experienced in the past or might, may do in the future is genetic. It said, another bit of research I found said that creatives are 8% more likely to suffer from bipolar disorder. Writers are 121% more likely to suffer from bipolar disorder and 50% more likely to commit suicide. Confabulations galore and Robin Elms and John Yorns, welcome. So yeah, so I thought that was something that really stuck out to me, was like how it seems like the two seem to go hand in hand. I don't know why. I started to think about why. I was thinking, well, okay, could it be possible that with being a creative, hey Paul, hello, mother's maiden name as well, hey Paul, welcome. Could it be that, with being a creative comes a little bit of madness, or the other way around, maybe with madness comes a little bit of creativity? I don't know. Another study found that I've had to write these down because I want to get the numbers right for you, but they gave 128 participants a creativity test, and then they gave them a blood test, and they found that the highest creatives carry genes that can lead to severe mental disorder. There was one other study that I found that I thought was really interesting. Femi Fontaine, welcome. And it said, so there's this type of schizophrenia that isn't quite as severe as full-on schizophrenia, and I can't remember the name of it, but basically this sort of lower level schizophrenia, they collected a load of people that had this particular affliction, and they gave them a household task, a household object, and asked them to come up with an original way of using this household object. And the people that came up with the most original way of using this household object were the ones that had the most pronounced version of this particular type of schizophrenia. So what they found was that there's a part of the brain there's a part of the brain that should be shut down to allow us to focus, to allow those people to focus. There's a part of the brain that should have been shut down, but in these people with this particular form of schizophrenia, it was very, very active. This part of the brain is about allowing us to focus, but for them, it was really, really active. It was almost like they couldn't shut their minds down. They were turning into these antennae for everything in the universe. And if that's what being a creative is, being open and available to everything in the universe, almost like trawling the universe, looking for ideas, then I'm not surprised that that becomes overwhelming, that's almost like too much, that it can lead to mental disorders. And the other thing as well is that maybe in some way, like our ego hijacks that experience and uses that experience to tell us shitty things about ourselves. That's what the ego does often, isn't it? Like, I talked about this in the criticism live chat, where the ego is often that little voice in the head just going, you're not good enough, you're never going to succeed, blah, 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 blah. And coupled with being open and available to the entirety of the whole universe, looking for ideas, and then your ego hijacking you and being like this noise in your head. Maybe that's why we are a little bit crazy. Maybe. Like I said, I don't know anything. I just, from those little bits of information, I surmise that we're very open and vulnerable people being creatives. Not to say that we're not strong, but we have to make ourselves available to so much, and not all of it is good. I'm wondering, maybe is a little bit of madness almost the price of being a creative? Is that the price you pay for accessing wonder? Is that you have to deal with a little bit of mental turmoil? Let me see what you guys are saying. Let me see. Hello, Tony Bridger, welcome. Kevin Lewis Ferguson Jackson, all your names there. So Steve says, I was telling someone about your ego idea last night and they found it really helpful. That's brilliant. Great. Alistair 10, nice of you to join us. So that was the first thing I was thinking. I think there is something in the fact that we are hypersensitive to the universe. Everyone knows that about creatives anyways, and it's like an old cliche about, the tortured artist and woe is me and all that sort of stuff. So it's not a new idea that we are sensitive and vulnerable creatures trying to navigate a world that wants to be in agreement about how ordinary and normal everything is, and we're trying to look for the wonder in all of that. And it's going to be difficult sometimes. I also wonder, do you think we're addicted to our ability to be able to access the wonder of the universe, to be able to tap into this infinite field of possibility? Maybe we get a bit addicted to that. Maybe we get overloaded. Maybe these are all the reasons why mental health and creativity are such strong bedfellows. Paul says artistry requires a degree of sensitivity. I'm guessing sensitivity isn't selective. Absolutely, yeah. Probably a lot of people can't pick and choose the times when they're feeling vulnerable, sensitive, energetically open and when they're not. But maybe that's a skill that we need to develop. And it's a different thing from being shut down and closed and unavailable as opposed to protecting your energy. But I'm going to come to that in a bit. Stephen says he likes this idea that the creative is overwhelmed with their experience of life. That certainly resonates with my experience, says Stephen. And he also says, are you going to talk later about creativity and depression? I'm going to talk about depression, believe me. But what was my next thought? See, this is the most sort of disjointed talk I think I've done, because I'm literally trying to figure it out. All I know is my own personal experience. Hey Guy, nice of you to join us. So forgive me if this is all a bit random and I lose my train, because I don't know. I literally don't know. Izzy Vars 7, thank you for joining. Guy and I have studied at with a particular acting coach, Howard Fine. Hey Wendy and Lydia Rickards, and he says that actors create from one of two different places, and I think it's probably true of creatives as well. He says they either create from joy or they create from pain, and I was never completely sure what he meant from that. I guess I was hoping that I was creating from joy, but having had a chance to think about it, I think what he means is that for some, it is a joy to create. Not necessarily that what you're creating is always joyful, but it is a joy to create. And for others, you need to feel pain to be able to generate your creativity. And that's a hard way to live, but one can't judge people who work like that, because some of the most brilliant creations that we have in our culture and society have come from that. I found a quote from Edvard Munch, who created the Scream paintings, and he says, my fear of life is necessary to me, as is my illness. I think he suffered from acute anxiety and depression. So these are indistinguishable from me, and their destruction would destroy my art. So, and I think that speaks to a lot of people that feel like not only is their their disorder part of them, but it is part of their work, and that without this disorder, could they function? Could they do their jobs? I remember I did a transformation workshop, the very first one I ever did. I've been sort of doing this work with a place called Concord Institute, and I remember after the first, you do 3 days on this program, and then you got a couple of days like in your life before you go back and finish this program, like a couple of days later. And I remember being in the middle bit of this program when you're sort of back in your life kind of thing, and I was watching Friends, which was my favourite TV show, and I wasn't finding it funny anymore, and I was like, shit, I've lost my sense of humour. I'm never going to be funny ever again. That's it, I'm done. So I think there is a legitimate and genuine fear that artists have, that if my stories and my anxieties and my hang-ups and my disorders, even if you want to take it to that, something as acute as that, if I let go of those things, can I function? Will I be able to produce what I produce? A lot of artists think it's necessary. A lot of great art has been, created out of pain. You just think of all our favourite love songs are mostly coming from pain. You think of like Adele's, was it 21 or 19? Like all those, Ed Sheeran, Whitney Houston, like all those ballads. It's all from pain. It's all from the loss of love. So who's to say that creating from pain, or there's a right way or not right place that you should create from, but certainly creating from pain does create incredible things, but it also is hard, it's painful. Hello, Owen. let me see, I'm just going back. So Kevin, Louis, Ferguson, Jackson, or is it Lewis? Creativity is looking at the world and making different connections. That ability is not reserved for creativity. Continually making different connections is a way of life. Yeah, I mean, Kevin, I would actually say that everyone's creative. Everyone is finding ways to express creativity, but creatives are doing it with the intent of creating art or entertainment, ideally for money, I guess. So that I think that's the only difference between, or one of the main differences between artists and people in sort of, you know, who don't work in that field. So yes, I would agree with you. Hello, Owen. And Paul says, my therapist was dead against me going on mood stabilizers meds because she firmly believed the numbness would dull my creativity. This is exactly what Kanye West says. I mean, we joke about how mad Kanye appears to be, but you know, from what I understand, he's supposed to be taking some form of medication, but he feels like that dulls his creativity. You know, we all have a different opinion on his music and what he's capable of doing. Personally, I think that he has produced genius work, and therefore I would understand why you wouldn't want to be taking medication that's going to dull that. Even if the price is a little bit of madness, or what society will perceive to be madness. Stephen says, you use your pain like an alchemist. You transform the direness of the pain into something good for others. Yeah, absolutely. Carrie Fisher said, take your broken heart and turn it into art. Ugh, my face is tingling and I feel like I could cry. All right, so what else? I wrote here, because of the depths that we feel, we experience great pain, but also great wonder. And maybe that's the cost of greatness. The cost of greatness, the price of knowing wonder in a way that maybe people who don't work in the creative fields don't have access to. If you're going to know that wonder, the price is going to be that you might experience a little bit of pain, of like existential pain. I'm always going on about Jason Silver, but this is something else that I noticed him talking about the other day that I thought was really interesting. So we are creators. I talked about that when I talked about the you know, magic in a previous conversation. We're creators. We're creating worlds when we create our art. If you're a writer, you are literally creating a whole new world. Even in a painting, there is a world suggested beyond the canvas. In a poem, a photograph, anything, all that sort of stuff. We're creating worlds, and that's the energy of gods. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what we're harnessing when we're creating worlds. And that means you have access to the infinite in that process. But we're also finite. We're also just flesh and bone. The other day, I was touching my cheek, and I had a real freak out because I was like, "There's a skull under there," and there's a skull that it's going to be a skeleton one day, and that's all it's going to be is just in the ground. You know, and it really sort of struck me that how flesh and bones we all are, and how finite. And I remember Jason Silver talking about the fact that he found that really traumatic. The idea that we have this access to wonder, but we're also infinity, but we're also incredibly finite. We have a fixed end date for our physical selves, and he didn't like it. And maybe that's what creators struggle with as well. Is not consciously, but maybe subconsciously, that is kind of traumatic for us, to know that we have the ability to create a world, but our world will most definitely end. Okay. So Steve says that's the calling of the creative. We transform the ordinary into something extraordinary. Confabulations galore. I just found out what confabulations means this week, but balancing that with the awareness of the suicide rates you mentioned, and first name, last name just laughs. Yeah, I mean, look, what can I say, confabulations galore, about that, about the suicide rates? I mean, that's a whole other conversation, and it's a whole other conversation. I can't speak to that because it's too big for me. Can you tell somebody, don't become an artist because, you know, there's a very high suicide rate, when actually being an artist might also be what's saving them from just chucking themselves off a bridge anyways, is being able to have some outlet like that. So I don't know that you can't mitigate one against the other and just go, don't, just in case. So, you know, creativity is so very much calling for so many people. Like, you're not choosing to do it, you are called into it Unfortunately, wouldn't it be great to just like want to work in the city and earn loads of money and retire at 50? Or just go for something just like super secure, like, you know, work as a, you know, in medicine or architecture or something like that, where there's more sense of guarantee of your job and security and all the rest of it. But that ain't what we're doing. Carly says, when I paint, I enter very balanced Zen-like space. Something comes through me on my daily life. Bit crazy, very sensitive. By the way, I had the bone realization too a few days ago. It's weird. It is so weird. Dr. Lyndon Edwards, welcome back. Confabulation Galore says, I was thinking more about not medicating rather than being creative. Gotcha. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Carly says, I have to paint. No choice. I'd go completely nuts without it. I feel the same way about writing, Carly. Even, like, there was a period, 2009, see, I can't remember dates, 2009, where I was just getting knockback after knockback after knockback, and I was like, that's it, fuck this world, I'm not writing anymore. So I stopped, and I don't know how long it took, maybe a year or so. It did take a long time, but I just naturally started going back. I forgave the world for not giving me what I wanted, and just because it was not about just the opportunity, of not about just making something happen for myself and the money and the recognition or whatever. It was these worlds are in me and I can't hold them in. So I have to spill them out onto a page, otherwise I'm gonna go crazy. Guy says, yes, it's a joy to create, but the pain comes from realizing the thing you've created is not very good. Woo! Guy, that's intense. Yeah, gosh. I mean, that's a different part of ourselves, I think, that has that experience of the sadness, because I remember somebody saying that what you create is in its most perfect form when it's only in your mind. Like, I have written the best screenplays. I have show-run the best TV shows. But then, yeah, once you've committed it to the real world, the material world, sometimes it lets you down. But I think it's a different part of ourselves that experiences that sadness of the failure or whatever. Probably the ego part of us, I would say, because the spirit part of us is just like, cool, I did it. You know, I remember somebody saying, David Norris, Carly, said that often artists are more interested in the process of creating the art than actually the art product itself. And once it's out there, they move on. Think of all those actors who, you know, doing these Q&As, round tables or whatever, and people go, oh, and there are so many of them say they don't watch their work. And yeah, a little bit of that is driven by ego. They don't want to see themselves and they're going to be a lot of self-judgment, blah, 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 blah. But a lot of it is because they've moved on. They're on to the next thing. Phil Osho. I know that name. Hi, bro. Is that... according to whom, Guy? Well, I think, Steve, that Guy means according to himself. I'm guessing that you're talking about your own personal experience. Carly says, absolutely, I remember David saying that. He's right. Yeah. And I feel like that in a way too. Is like my experience with the short film that I just made, Amber, is totally different now, or my relationship with it, should I say, is totally different now than it was when I was actually in the process of creating. Creating was a different experience. I don't know how to quite to describe it. Maybe I have to sort of sit down and think about that or something. Steve says, no one sets out to create something that's rubbish. Of course they don't. Of course they don't. And that's why it can be sad when it doesn't turn out. Or you experience sadness when it doesn't turn out how you intended it to. So... so like I said, the only, oh gosh, very thirsty. I think it's the talking. So the only experience that I really have regarding mental health in terms of being able to say anything of value is my own experience. So I'll share a little bit of that. So there was two major bouts of depression that I experienced. One was, the first one, I didn't know what it was. So I just knuckled down. It was like being in a boat that was at sea in a storm, but I didn't know that storms weren't normal, if that makes sense. So I literally just sort of head down and didn't say anything to anyone, but I didn't know that there was a word for what I was experiencing. Every day just felt like there was like 10 seconds in the morning where everything was very quiet and peaceful and okay, and then the rest of the day would be various levels of existential terror, anxiety, and just feeling this sense of darkness on me. And it took probably a few months to clear, and I started seeing a therapist, and unfortunately, I mean, she was great, but as soon as I felt better, I was like, bye, bitch, bye. And I stopped seeing her. She dealt with the top level, the surface stuff that was creating the depression, but I never allowed her to drill any deeper, because I thought, right, the problem is obviously solved because I feel good again, and that was my objective, was to feel good again. So I'm gone. Thanks for everything you've done. But it came back again, and it came back with vengeance in 2012. So hi, Richard Bunting, thanks for joining. So what had happened is, I think there was an accumulation of just realizing that I was doing the wrong thing. I was in the wrong field. I was starting to get really exhausted by the work that I was doing. I was never, no matter how long I took for a break, I was never refreshed. I was always tired. I was always at this slight level of anxiety. And this was around the time that I was doing a lot of panel shows and stuff like that. And a lot of my peers were in this mindset. I was surrounded by this mindset. And I bought into it as well myself. Hey, Peely and Elsa. I was surrounded by this mindset. Every comedian should want to be on a panel show. Success as a comedian is being on a panel show. I was surrounded with people that would just either, how do I get on Mock the Week? Or how was Mock the Week? Or, do you know what I mean? It was just like this intense thing of like, that is the holy grail. And once you get it, you should be happy. And if you haven't got it, then you will be happy once you get it. And I had it, and I wasn't enjoying it. I didn't realize how much I wasn't enjoying it. I didn't realize how much stress it was causing me, and I didn't realize that I didn't have to do it, because there's such an agreement in the comedy industry of the things that you should want. And I don't think it's specific to the comedy industry. I think it's it's there for all industries. In fact, it's part of the fabric of society is agreements about what we should want out of life. And so I was just sort of going along with it, getting these opportunities coming in, which I'm massively grateful for. And they opened up loads of doors, and they've given me what I have now. So I don't regret any of that stuff. But all I'm saying is that what it led to was essentially, I suppose, a breakdown, because, and not a dramatic, Arthur Fowler. It wasn't that. It was depression. I couldn't go out. I couldn't work. I could go out, but I couldn't work for just a short spell. And what I found was that I could only really think about the immediate future. As soon as I started thinking, or the present, as soon as I started thinking way off into the future or started thinking about the past, this weight would come onto me, and it was just like panic, I suppose. And I remember I got asked to do this thing. There was a lot of things in my diary as well once this thing hit, and it hit quite suddenly. And there was a lot of things in my diary, and I remember I was booked to do a sort of a reading with an orchestra at Stratford Theatre Royal, and I'd done a lot of work with Stratford Circus, and I'd done a lot of work with them previously, so it shouldn't have been a big deal for that. They weren't imagining it was a big deal, but for me it was just like, it took me so long just to get out of bed, get makeup on my face, put that mask on, and get there. And I arrived late, and I was just like, I remember thinking like, oh God, I just can't do this, but I don't want to uphold the stereotype of black people not turning up or being unreliable or late. I remember like having that sort of weird. Anyways, I did it, I made it, and you know, I suppose that old phrase Dr. Theatre kicked in or whatever. It's a term that actors use sometimes, of getting on stage just sometimes just gets you through the situation. Steen, T18, welcome. But yeah, that was some tough times, and because of the previous experience I'd had, I knew to get myself into therapy. Basically, I knew that something was coming up and something needed to be addressed, and it turned out to be my relationship with my dad. I won't go into it because it's not really sort of anything to do with anything, but like I think I was probably seeing my therapist for probably about 2 months, 3 months, something like that, of just working through this very specific thing. Occasionally, like, other little bits and pieces would come up, but it was really about this. And it's weird how I didn't think that my relationship with my dad was like a thing. I just had sort of written him off. He's that guy, and that's okay. But I never thought that there was anything in me that needed to be healed. And I guess maybe I was living in the space of I must deliver and I must be good enough, and I was just wearing myself out trying to live this story of must be good enough, must do everything that's offered to me, and that had somehow had something to do with my relationship with my dad, or the absence of my dad, should I say. So I will say that where it concluded was that we ended up sort of reconnecting, and I remember that internally I experienced almost like the completing of a circuit in me when we reconnected, because we hadn't spoken for like, I want to say like 15 years, something like that. Hadn't even been in communication for 15 years. However, we are not in touch now, and the great thing is that because I found after time that it wasn't very rewarding being in touch with him, and then I was just like, first of all I felt bad, and then I was like, hang on, I don't owe this guy anything, like I don't want to use him, but I had taken from that whole course of therapy and reconnecting with him, I'd taken what I needed to, but I didn't, if it wasn't serving me, I didn't owe him connection with me because he left us. So it's not necessarily the sort of neat, happy ending, but for me it was, because I got what I needed from the interaction. Paul says, do you think it's important or even possible to separate your creative identity from your personal identity? As in, are they one and the same? Gosh, God, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't know. I think what I'll say is something that I'm going to come to, which is about energy really, and just like protecting yourself so that the creative, vulnerable part of you isn't exposed when it's in situations where it's not going to be appreciated. But I'll come to that. So one of the things that I hope will be helpful as well to you guys is that one of the things that my therapist said about depression was it is often your being calling for some sort of change. So in me, what that whole episode was also part of was a general movement towards being more authentically my creative self. That's all fancy words to say just doing the things that I love rather than the things that I thought I should be doing, because there's not a lot of joy when you're doing things because you think they should. I remember, hello, Nick James. I remember seeing a documentary about Roy Chubby Brown. Now, he's not the sort of person that you would have thought would come up in a conversation like this, but I really got a sense from him that he was stuck, that he had gotten himself into this, playing this role of the character that, you know, he plays in when he does his stand-up, and he was stuck, and he didn't want to be in it because because it wasn't challenging him, and he was being forced to say things that he didn't necessarily want to say for the sake of his success. Do you know what I mean? He was stuck playing this role. It's not a joyful place to be stuck or feel like you're stuck. Obviously he's not. He could stop and he could totally turn into a Stuart Lee if he wanted to. He'd lose a lot of fans, but there's no reason why you can't be who you need to be as a creative, other than ideas that you've planted in your own mind or you've allowed to be planted in your mind. So doing what you want to do, doing what you authentically are called to do, you feel wants to come from you, is going to be a lot more of a joyful experience than doing what you think you should. More 4690, welcome. So, yeah, so she said that depression is often a call for change. So we want to, depression's bad and we want to medicate and we want to beat it down and stuff, but there's potentially, I'm not saying don't do all those things, obviously go to a professional practitioner and find out exactly how you need to address your situation if that's what you're in, but potentially there's riches in terms of lessons that you can get from it if you're willing to go through the eye of the storm with someone you trust and can help you with that. I think my therapist is amazing and she was perfect for me, and you know, she held me up in a way that, and supported me through that process in a way that, you know, I needed at that time. And if that's what you're in and that's what you need, find it so that you can find your sort of happiness on the other side of it. Peely says, good on you, mate, for getting some sense of closure with your relationship with your dad. I had a very similar thing happened with me and my dad. Hope you feel in a better place now. Yeah, I do. Thank you. I mean, yeah, I made sense of it. But who knows? Because I saw something the other day that was saying that life isn't a path, it's a cycle, a circle, a spiral, and you pass by the same situation again, but with a new sense of self and a new set of a new knowledge. So I might cycle back around past this whole dad thing one more time, but it'll be a sort of different me that approaches it, and I'll be able to take a deeper cut at that relationship. But I feel like acknowledging the sort of effect of his absence has been huge for me in terms of just on a personal level, how I relate to, you know, men, and how I relate to myself, how I've tried to be my own father and been really hard, you know, in my 20s and 30s and stuff, and just like, I'll fight you, because I thought that I had to be my own father, and that, you know, addled interpretation that I had of that. Stephen says, 100% agree, I think depression is an undervalued aspect of authentic living. Yeah, I mean, you try telling the NHS that. I mean, yeah, it is, it's really valuable, but it's like, yeah, it has to be handled responsibly. You can't just be going, oh, you're depressed, oh, you just need change. You know, you really have to authentically step by step work through that shit. Like if someone's in that. Citizen Joke, like Star Wars. I don't know what you mean. So I just wanted to talk through a few things that have been really helpful for me, because like I say, again, all I've got is my own experience. So I thought if I shared some of those things, something might chime with somebody who's just like, I'll keep that in my back pocket as a technique, or that would help me now, whatever. So I just thought I would share some of those things. I've mentioned therapy already. What I feel like is that when depression comes along, it's like a story that we've been telling ourselves about ourselves or the world, or how we relate to the world, has come to an end. That story has come to an end, but because it is so part of who we are, it's almost like we need to find someone to give us permission to let that shit go. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like I don't know, like me feeling like I have to do everything myself is a story that I have. Obviously there's supporters and people out there who want to help me, but because I'm in this story, nobody wants to help me, I've got to do everything myself. That's how I live my life, but that can become exhausting. But also the story can exhaust itself, it can run out of steam, but because you're so identified with it, you don't want to let it go, because there's a sort of a sadness, there's an existential death that happens with that. So it's almost like you need to find a process that will allow you to let it go. Thus therapy. You know, therapy is a great way of basically that outside eye, that objective eye, looking at your situation and just going, you don't need that anymore. And then, you know, finding some technique, some way of helping you to let that thing go. So that's what I felt, that's kind of what I felt like almost in a way the therapy was, particularly in relation to my dad. I feel like that's really what she was doing. Is she was saying, I'm going to give you the chance, I'm going to help you walk through the steps where you could just let whatever scar was put on you by his absence, giving you permission to let that go. Because on my own I wouldn't have done it, because on my own I wouldn't have seen it. So also, workshops, certain workshops I found to be very useful. If you are in London, there is a place called Concord Institute that does amazing workshops. They're called, the topic or subject matter is called ontological studies, which is a fancy way of saying the study of being. It's about looking at who we are from a more objective perspective, taking an aerial view of like the human condition, and from that, hopefully navigating a little bit of, or negotiating a little bit of freedom for yourself in terms of how you are in the world. That has been incredibly helpful for me, and I've done a lot of workshops and programs with them. Also, literature. I've read so many different books, and I know like the whole self-help thing is like, there's a lot of like noise about how are they any good, blah blah blah. Look, the thing is you might read one book. Like I'm reading this Anthony Robbins book at the moment, and it might not be right now that what I'm reading has an impact, or it might be that what I'm reading has an impact because of all the other things that I've done. So it's an accumulative effect. So you can't just say, oh, I read The Power of Now and suddenly, this happened for me. Yeah, you might have read The Power of Now, but before that you did a meditation retreat, and before that you did some landmark workshop, or whatever, and it all accumulates to that moment, so that what you're reading in the Anthony Robbins book opens up for you because you've had all that sort of other experience and knowledge and wisdom planted in your heart that hasn't quite, like ticking time bomb, waiting for the right thing to detonate, it goes off. L22SLE, I don't know how I'm supposed to say that, but hello and welcome. Also, I just want to say as well, like some of the things I'm going to say are, they could be considered trite, because like, it's the sort of thing that people might go, oh, you just need to, go on holiday or go by the sea or just breathe. And it's the sort of, the sort of stuff that people come up with that gets regurgitated. But I want to introduce them to you with the perspective that they've worked for me. So I'm not just saying, oh, these are the things that you should do. It's like, these are the things that have worked for me. If they work for you too, then great. Does that make sense? And I wanted to just be like, oh, I heard meditation was good, so therefore you should do it too. It's like, I've tried it and it does make a difference. But let me say something about meditation. I'm not talking about sitting cross-legged and trying to clear your mind or trying to observe your mind. I can't do that. So interpret meditation however you need to. I think of meditation as being in a flow process, being still and quiet and present in your flow process. I realised that sitting quietly cross-legged just does not work for me. I can't do it. I can't. All that happens is I become abundantly sort of aware of how noisy my mind is. What I found works as a meditation for me is either cooking or journaling, and that I can do. That I can sit down and commit to. That I can. My mind is quiet, and in the space of like writing a journal or whatever, I can start to see different situations in a much more open way and things like that. So I haven't got a quiet mind because obviously I'm thinking about what I want to write, but there is a sort of a flow to it. So find your thing that can give you that quiet flow presence. I found that gardening is very good for that, because time just flies. It just does when you're gardening. It's so brilliant. I haven't got a garden, so that's what I'm journaling. But just like, fuck's sake, that's what creative processes are as well, aren't they? I remember like I had some plant pots that I decided that I wanted to spray gold, and so I took them out the back and it was just such a nice thing to do that was quiet, and I was just completely focused because I was trying not to get gold paint all over the I was in the back there in the laundry room or whatever. So it doesn't have to be sitting cross-legged or yoga or anything like that, because the purpose is not to be able to sit cross-legged or to be able to do a downward dog. The purpose is to quieten the mind. So if drawing does that, or if spraying pots, or if an adult colouring book does that, genuinely does that, if you're completely present when you're doing it, then do that. That can be your meditation. Do you know what I mean? The other thing as well is that I'm starting to take on more and realise that how important it is self-care. I think we don't realise how important what we consume is to our mental well-being, and there's so much research and we just sort of choose to ignore it. But what we eat, what we drink, what we consume in terms of information, that all becomes part of who we are. You are what you eat. Well, you are what you consume, I think it should be. So if you're consuming sort of daily negative news and stuff like that, like I can feel there's a point. I watch the news in the morning just to find out what's going on in the world, but I can feel at the point where I've had enough. I don't want any more of this. Trump did this, and Brexit that, and because it's never positive. It's never. My mum said to me the other day, "Oh, there's too much news," and I know what she means. It's like there's too much unhappiness coming through the television. You can only take so much. Social media, I talked about it last week. My God, I mean, I really am now consciously measuring how much I go on Twitter, because I just don't enjoy it anymore. It's a negative energy that, I mean, it's almost become a dumping ground for people's anger, and it's become really sort of unpleasant to sort of go on it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I'm just saying, like, my choice is I would rather be on a platform like Instagram, where people are trying to create nice images and do pleasant things, and you know, there's so much positivity. I'm sure there's like shitty things too on Instagram, but I don't see a lot of that. And I think we can bring some consciousness to curating what it is we're consuming, so that we're not getting filled up with all this sort of negative energy. Because I think I said last week as well, like, I'm so aware of like how my heart rate just goes up and up and up, and my breathing becomes short when I go on like Twitter, even Facebook. I'm like, no, don't give me any of that Trump news. You know, unless he's, you know, impeached or something like that. I don't need to know. He said something bad. Shock. Just show me pictures of kittens. That isn't to say don't be informed, but I'm saying there's a difference between being informed and overwhelmed. I think the guy in The Secret said that. And that was before the internet, wasn't it? The Secret came out before the internet. Let me just see what you guys are saying. Philip Kelly says hello. Confabulations Galore says that's exactly how I feel about meditation too. Yeah, you got to do what works for you, man. Runch 1951, welcome. Varushka, hello, welcome back. Carly says being in nature barefoot when possible is very powerful and supporting well-being and a grounded connection to life. I could not agree more. I have a real thing about worms and shit, but the times I have been brave enough to walk on slightly dewy grass, it's just gorgeous. I don't know what's happening energetically, but I know that it feels really good. I did it one time though. I was in like outdoor yoga class and we were barefoot and it felt really good, but part of my mind was like, there's something on my foot, and I looked down and there was literally like a worm creeping across my foot. I had to like keep my chill. Alistair 10, hello. Oh, hello all, Alistair 10 says. Breathe. Somebody said, I don't know who, anxiety is excitement minus breath. When you are stressed and you're not having a good time, your breathing gets shallow. So breathe fully and deeply. Something was stressing me out today, so I just made sure that I was breathing deeply, and it can't, whatever it is that you're holding on to can't survive in the moment when your breath goes from the very edges of your capacity to the edges of your capacity. I remember being in a class once, and I said that, I don't know why, but I had just had this phrase or this idea come into my head that the universe is at the beginning and the end of every breath. I don't know what I meant by that, and I still don't really, but I'm just going to mention it now because I mentioned breath. The other thing is to stop. Sometimes when something is really troubling us, we try and work on top of that. I say stop. Stop, figure it out. Even just to let sort of most extreme part of the emotional experience pass, so that you can carry on with what you're doing, because you're probably doing more damage by trying to continue on top of this experience. Being present. Now that's one of these trite things that people are always talking about, but what I'll say briefly about that is that oftentimes we react to something in the moment, not based on what happened, but based on a whole bunch of stories that we've been building up over our whole lives. And being present is also not just about being in the moment, blah, 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 but it's also about experiencing a moment as it really is, unadulterated, like not with all your stories and baggage that you're putting on top of it. It can be a really interesting process when something happens and you're just like say you're on the tube and you get pushed or something. It's like, people always doing that to me. Or you could be like, oh, that person just didn't think that through. Or, oh, that person's probably just trying to, do you know what I mean? Like, instead of like loading it with all these negative ideas that you have. And if you think about that, about a bigger thing that happens in your life, not just getting nudged, but like somebody close saying something to you that you don't like or something like that, if you can apply those same principles, it can save you a lot of trauma. Brene Brown, in her book Dare Greatly, has a process. She calls it the reckoning, the rumble, and the revolution, where you start to observe these little moments and really start to get curious about, is it really what I think it is? Because we often project a thing onto a situation, but it's not necessarily not necessarily what has happened. So, get curious about that and be present in terms of how you're reacting to something or how something lands with you. I talked about changing modes last week as well. I think the more I've talked about that, the more the idea seems to have been popping up during my week. And it's got another name. It's called Fake It Till You Make It. And I didn't realise that essentially it's the same thing. So what it is rather than waiting until you feel like doing something to do it, start the process of doing it, and the feeling to do it may follow. So, for example, I was reading that Stephen Kotler book, the Stealing Fire one, and there was a thing in there that they said that if you stand in Wonder Woman pose, so basically hands on hips, legs, feet slightly apart, for 30 seconds, you will generate an experience or the feeling of feeling more confident. Just do it for 30 seconds. Now, what most people would do, say they were going into a party or a stressful situation, a meeting or something like that, they would go, oh, I don't feel very confident, and they would give this like insecure sort of presentation or whatever, or just like not want to mix and mingle at a party or something. But actually, you can do it the other way around. You can be the other way around. You can generate confidence, hands on hips, Wonder Woman, and then go and do your thing. Now, that's just like a superficial example, but it's like, say you want to go do a workout, but you're not feeling like it. As I was not feeling like it last week. But what I did is I put my stuff on and I went out and generated the feeling for enjoyment while I was out. Farishka says, Wonder Woman pose for 30 seconds works. Right. Atman Ahuramazda, hello, thanks for joining. I've got 5 minutes left, so now that I know that Instagram cuts people off after an hour, let me get through this. Oh my God, there's so much. Okay, next one. Follow your bliss. This is another one of those things that people say, but it's absolutely true. One of the things that I noticed about that 2012 depressive episode that I had was that I was like, shit, I've got loads of money. I've got seemingly the career that most comedians would want, and I am so depressed. And it made me realize that having it all, that cliche thing of like where people talk about having it all isn't going to make you happy. And when someone rich and famous tells you that, you're like, yeah, well, I'll take your millions and then you can try having my, bank balance, and then we'll see who's miserable. But actually, I've been to the front line, guys. I'm back to tell you that it's true. I've never been more happy than just working with friends, making like short films for no money, that type of stuff. Not to say that, those great opportunities aren't fun to do, but you've got to do the ones that feel right for you. doing things because you should, or because people expect you to, or because you set this goal and or you're on this path now, so you have to, that's never going to lead to your happiness. Follow your bliss. Do what makes you happy. Do what makes you feel whole. And an audience and an appreciation for what you're doing will find you. Don't think that thing gets a lot of appreciation, I'm going to do that, if it's not in your heart to do it, because it will be a very hollow experience. Energy. Manage your energy. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Paul, I think you brought it up, separating your work self from your from your personal self, or your creative self from your personal self. Another thing, my therapist, a little tip she gave me, she goes, when you go out, you got to protect yourself against the energy out there. So she said, pretend to zip yourself up. Put on this armor and zip yourself up. And I sometimes do. I do mime the zipping myself up and just, you can't hurt me. Because I am a sensitive person, and there's a lot of energy out there. I mean, there's just masses of like negative energy, just noise all coming at you. So do what you can to protect yourself. That includes the social media and, you know, all that sort of stuff. Make sure that you're managing what is coming into you. That includes people as well. If there's negative people in your life, don't let that energy infiltrate and affect you. And it's hard for us as well, because we have got to be totally tough and navigate this creative landscape, which can come up with so many challenges, criticism and stuff like that. But we've also got to be vulnerable. So this is the challenge, is to, and so self-care has to be at the center of that. Look after yourselves. I'm aware that I've got 1 minute to go, so let me just see what, hello, Stamped Radish. And Stephen says, creativity and money may be a future topic. I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking exactly the same thing. Hi, Ryder Pedersen. Okay, guys, so listen, I've had to sort of, I knew that I was gonna sort of run out of time a little bit, because I felt like there was a lot to say, and obviously it's a big topic. One other thing I'm gonna add is that I was watching an Oprah thing the other day, and Lisa Nicole, who's kind of like a self-help personal development guru type lady, she says, I am the first example of how I'm supposed to be loved. So self-care for yourself is the message to the world, to let the rest of the world know how you deserve to be treated and how to care for you. And my final thought was, don't get too serious, laugh a lot, because none of this is real. It's all a dream. I've got 12 seconds to go. Oh, thank you, Guy, thank you so much. Stephen, thank you. No worries. Part 2. Gosh, I don't know. Anyway, see ya. This is the after show. I just suddenly felt like that was really abrupt. Stephen, I was just saying, hey, Citizen Joke. And confabulations galore. Hello, Varushka, MP, Mandy, hi, Carly. Stephen, I know it's brutal, right? Femi Fontaine, hello, welcome back, guys. Yeah, I just felt that was super abrupt, and I wanted to say thank you all for being there, and for just, you know, just being a great listening and just contributing and stuff, and helping me come up with ideas and just allowing the conversation to flow. Paul, thank you. No worries. Hey, John Wells, 1972. Does anyone have anything that they want to add just before we wrap up, or anything they want to ask about, share with the rest of the group? Share with the group? A part 2. What do you reckon it should be about, Carly? What are your thoughts? Senator 1993K, welcome. Cool, thank you. Thank you, Citizen Joke. What's your name? I'm pretty good at remembering people's names, but yeah. Thank you, Varushka. Thank you very much. Stephen says, too many things. This provokes so much thinking. Yeah, I just felt like, it's weird actually, because as I was working through, I mean, let me just show you here. As I was working through this, I was realizing that sort of each heading was almost like a whole talk in itself, sort of thing. So I just had to sort of barrel through it. Oh, I see, Carly, I see. Well, what I did is I just did the headlines. So, for example, you know, on the things that we can do to protect ourselves and look after ourselves. Yeah, I just gave the headlines, but I was going to give examples and things like that. Oh, cool. Thank you, Carly. Oh, hang on. What's this? That's something about... Confabulations galore says, Bill Hicks, don't worry, don't be afraid ever, because this is all just a ride. Exactly. And then Carly says, brilliant, by the way, especially regarding follow your bliss. Yeah, I think I've had to learn the hard way as well, because I really did literally just follow what people were telling me, and I didn't realize that there was another way. And so, and even still, I've not mastered it completely yet. I'm still learning, but I think it's a skill that I've realized I can consciously create for myself and strengthen, is believing in myself and believing in the direction that I want to go in, and not feeling like I have to take all these circuitous routes to get there, that I can just head straight there, even if it's a tougher journey. At least I'll be enjoying that journey. Stephen, whoa, confabulations galore says, thanks for all your prep and hard work. Oh, thank you. That's very nice of you to acknowledge that. It's great for me as well, because what it means is that during the week, I'm sort of looking out for stuff to contribute to you guys, but also B, I'm working on myself, like, through the course of the week, and sort of gotta practice what you preach, you know. And Stephen says, you know, if we all live closer, this is the kind of thing I could see a group of people getting together to talk about and really helping each other. Feels like you go. Feels like you ego? What do you mean? Oh, I think there might be a little typo at the end. I'd love to know what you meant on that one. Paul says, Tommy says hi, he just walked in. Hi, Tommy. Carly says she loves the Bill Hicks quote. Oh, here we go. Stephen says, you've got some good people on board here. I definitely do. It's such a nice group. Your fingers hit send too early. No worries. All right, guys. Well, look, awesome sauce, as the young people say. I'm going to leave it there, but thank you all so much for being here throughout. Our Senator 1993 is supporting from Zimbabwe. Keep on inspiring black women to make it. All women, all people. But yeah, no, I really appreciate you saying that. Paul says, thanks, Andy. Vrishka says, yeah, we rock. Thank you for being here, Carly. I think next week, Stephen, I was thinking about the money thing. Not money, but wealth. And yeah, I don't know if there's enough to justify a whole talk, but I'll see what comes up during the week. Thank you for people that voted as well. It was quite interesting, because I was like set on talking about failure, and everyone's like, nope, we want mental health. So that's what happened. The people spoke. All right, guys, have a lovely evening. If you are in that time zone, have a lovely rest of your day. And your stopper, I'm just about to sign off, but lovely to see you here. Fortune just joined as well. Yeah, have a lovely day wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and hopefully I will see you soon.